Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we'll discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section in the first topic, we'll try to understand the challenges which are acting as impediment in the growth of MSME sector and the suggestions provided by the recently released report of Niti Aayog. Then in the second topic, we'll try to understand the status of maternal healthcare in the country and the steps taken by the government of India to improve the maternal healthcare. Then from your simplified section, we will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide you much important value addition keeping in mind the approaching Mains 2025 examination on the lines of previously asked questions. So stay tuned. The apex policy think tank of the Government of India, Niti Aayog, has recently released a report titled Designing Policy for Medium Enterprises, where it has suggested for streamlining research and development efforts for the further scaling of the MSME sector. The MSME sector, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of industries and development. So the first question which arises in our mind is that what is this classification of the industries into micro, small and medium enterprises? Well, your budget 2025 has actually kind of introduced a new set of revised criteria for the classification of enterprises into these three categories. So let's say, for example, you are an enterprise who has invested a capital of 2.5 crore rupees, and from that you are incurring a turnover, that is an overall earning of 10 crore rupees an year, then you will fall into the micro category. Similarly, if you have an investment of 25 crore rupees and a turnover of 100 crore rupees, you fall in the category of small. And if you have 125 crore rupees of investment and 500 crore rupees of turnover, then you would basically fall in the category of medium enterprises. Keep this in mind that such classification is done on the basis of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act of 2006 as per the Gazette of India. The idea is that what is the use of such classification at first place? So such classification into this micro, small and medium enterprises actually help such small scale industries to access to collateral free loans. So obviously there will be lending entities, let's say for example public and private sector banks, who will eventually provide some specialized loan products to these micro, small and medium enterprises on lower interest rate. And this will eventually help these enterprises to scale their business by kind of introducing high value products as well. Second is the easier government tender participation. So obviously certain public sector tenders are specifically reserved for low value players like these MSME sectors, so that they can also be integrated over a period of time to the global value chains by kind of expanding their production and integrating of technology as well. So obviously that will lead to the research and development upgradation as per the demands of Industry 4.0. That will also, the government provides various kind of tax and duty concessions. So let's say for example, if you are in a startup, you are providing certain kind of tax concessions by the government. The idea is that the turnover has increased. Let's say for example, earlier if it was 250 crore, now it has almost been doubled to 500 crore. The idea behind this is that now let's say there is an industry, the industry can think to kind of expand their business and at the same time also avail the benefits which are provided by the government. Thus, over a period of time, this will lead to kind of tapping the global markets as well, and thus ultimately transitioning the Make in India to Make for the World. So we have understood the classification and the use of such classification. The next question which arises in our mind is that what is the status of MSME sector, which is considered as the cornerstone of India's economic growth? Is it true? The answer is yes. Just look at the contribution of the MSME sector in the gross value addition in the economy, which existed at 27% in 2020 and scaled up to 30.1% by the year of 2023. The kind of contribution in the export sector. So for example, as per our foreign export policy, we have set up a target of 1 trillion rupees of export by the year of 2030. And to achieve that, an integral part is this MSME sector, where the kind of exports from this MSME sector almost tripled down from 3.95 lakh crore in 2020 to 12.4 lakh crore in the year of 2024. Remember that when it comes to the share of export of MSME In all India export, the MSME sector contributes to 45% as of the year of 2024. And there exist export-oriented MSMEs which accounts for 1,73,350. Thus, this MSME sector has become a kind of an employment engine as it provides employment to approximately 11 crore people. The majority of the sector of these MSME are the nothing but startups, and thus it significantly contributes in the startup ecosystem, making our country the third largest startup ecosystem in the world altogether. However, there are several challenges which are being faced by the MSME sector, and that's what has been highlighted in the Niti Aayog's reports as well. But to understand these challenges in much depth, we are going to refer to a report titled Understanding the MSME Sector, the Progress and Challenges, and the report which has been released by the Small Industry Development Bank of India. According to which, the first and foremost challenge is the lack of adequate access to finance or over-dependence on informal sources. So, for example, as per the SIDBI report, 12% of micro and 2 to 3% of small and medium enterprises relies on informal sources of credit, which basically charges high collateral for any loan which they provide. And at the same time, they also have much higher interest rate, much over and above the kind of normal economic or market norms. Thus, the idea is that they basically hamper the integration of these small and medium enterprises into the larger domestic value chain altogether. So, as per the SIDBI report, there exists a gap of 24% or a gap of credit supply of 30 lakh crore to MSME sector. This kind of credit is required but is not being reaching to these MSMEs. The second major issue is the non-formalization of MSME sector. So why there is so much reliance on informal sector? Because there are so many MSMEs which are non-formalized in the nature. For this purpose, we refer to the 73rd NSS report, which basically provided us a data which said that 6.3 lakh unincorporated non-agricultural entities existed in the country. What does it mean by incorporated? It basically means that these many non-agricultural entities did not had a PAN or GST number. So it is very obvious that these private and public sector banks will kind of deter themselves from lending to these unincorporated entities. The third is that further credit crunch is actually caused. So one is the issue of kind of relying on informal sources. Second is the non-formalization. Further credit crunch is actually caused by delayed payments from larger enterprises and government agencies, which kind of just roadblocks the credit supply to the larger MSME market. The fourth is the technology deficit which is faced by the MSME. So to understand this, let's refer to the Global Innovation Index 2024, where our country ranked abysmally low at 39. At the same time, even if we refer to this year's budget, it basically showcases that still our country is spending less than 1% of the GDP on research and development. So that basically means that this low expenditure on the research and development by the public sector, if it is not compounded by, let's say, even if equal amount of spending by the private sector, it basically transitions to the low technology upgradation of this MSME sector, which is kind of not at par with the demands of Industry 4.0. The next is that, let's say, for example, there exists a MSME who is accessing the credit from formal sources only and has done all the technology upgradation in the world. But do these MSME have supply of skilled manpower for technology upgradation? The answer is no. For example, you guys can recall how we were reading about the Periodic Labor Force Survey 2022 to 2023 report, which basically said that 86% of the people in the working age, that is between 15 to 59 years, they have no vocational training at all. So basically there exists a kind of a deficit called as IRSO deficit, that is industry required skill offered mismatch which exists. Next is that even if all these challenges are overcome and we kind of bring our product and now we want it to distribute across the country, there exist infrastructure constraints or logistic constraints which are faced by the whole manufacturing sector altogether. For this purpose, we can refer to the Logistic Performance Index report released by the World Bank, where we basically ranked 38th. Just look at our abysmal ranking in infrastructure score and logistic competence score. Even today, the kind of the contribution or the cost of the logistic in the overall cost of the product is 12 to 14% in our country. So for example, let's say if you are buying 100 rupees toy, you are paying 14 rupees just for the logistic purpose. In the developed nation, this logistic cost is as low as 7 to 8 rupees. So all of these factors augment and basically leads to what? Limited branding and outreach capacity of this MSME sector products to kind of tap the global markets. So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India? First and foremost, the government said that okay, there is a credit crunch which is being faced by the MSME sector. What we will do? We will provide credit guarantee cover. Where it said that, let's say for example, if you are an MSME sector enterprise and you are availing a credit, 10 crore credit up to 10 crore will be kind of covered or guaranteed by the government itself. Or for example, if you are a startup altogether, this credit guarantee cover extends to 20 crore. At the same time, the government is also trying to boost the startup in the priority sectors. So the government is saying that, let's say for example, if you are in a startup and you go to kind of avail a specialized loan product on which the interest rate is being charged of 6%. The government says that for such startups, specifically in the priority sector, such interest rate will be lowered down by 1% to 5% only. And these priority sectors basically include kind of labor intensive sectors, such as for example your solar photovoltaic module production, or for example your electric vehicle battery production. The third is the government is also trying to boost more MSMEs in the labor intensive sectors, specifically under the National Manufacturing Mission. So for example, if there exists the Agra footwear industry, which basically accounts for 28% of the total export in the apparel sector across the country, the government is focusing more on such labor intensive sectors at the grassroots level. The government is basically has envisaged that by the year of 2030, through these labor intensive sectors in the MSMEs, the government is going to create more than 22 lakh jobs and create a turnover of more than 4 lakh crore. The idea is that various such footwear making shops in the region of Agra, they will be kind of traditional artisans, craftsmen. So the government is saying that don't worry, we are going to provide you skilling under the Pradhan Mantri Vishwakarma Yojana, the skilling of traditional artisans, craftsmen, as well as we are also going to provide you various kind of technology upgradation if it is required. Also under PM Vishwakarma Yojana, we will also provide you various kind of collateral free loans as well. But what if you are not registered? What if you are an informal enterprise? The government says don't worry, we are going to formally register you under the Udyam registration portal. At the same time, the government is saying that we need to move away from small agricultural based enterprises to non-agricultural enterprises, and for that the government has launched employment generation program where the credit linked subsidy is provided if you are availing this credit to open a non-farm enterprises. So these are the various steps which has been taken by the government. The government has also increased the procurement under the public procurement policy PPP by the government, which is done through the eGEM portal, which you guys might have heard about. So just look at the kind of the procurement which the government is doing from the MSMEs or from the women-centric MSMEs altogether. The government has also kind of significantly increased the budget expenditure on the MSMEs altogether. The recent report by the Niti Aayog also provided several other suggestions. The report is titled Designing a Policy for Medium Enterprises, where it has suggested that there shall be a dedicated financing scheme for MSME sector to avail various kind of loans at concessional rates. The second suggestion is to launch a medium enterprise credit card with pre-approved limit of 5 crore altogether. Then the Niti Aayog is suggesting that there exists a fund called as Self-Reliant India Fund. So from this fund, reserve 25 to 30% for the financing projects of the medium firms itself. What is this special Self-Reliant India Fund? This fund is for exclusively financing the projects by medium firms. The SRI fund has an allocation of 10,000 crore from the center and 40,000 crore from the private equity. The Niti Aayog is suggesting that we shall adopt a kind of a European Union kind of fund mechanism where the government after due process will identify a set of major R&D gaps and also provide the proposal from medium enterprises to bridge these gaps. For this purpose, there shall be access to product testing infrastructure and that shall be provided under the cluster development program. All of these factors, Niti Aayog suggests, will ultimately lead to kind of more formal employment, thus kind of also acting as a deterrent to the unemployment issue which prevails in our country. Very recently, in your Analyst itself, we had discussed about the first ever monthly labor force survey which was released. Can any one of you in the comment section comment down what is the current monthly rate of unemployment which prevails across the country? Just try to remember these facts, attempt this question, and we move forward to the next news. The demographic dividend of the country, that is, the working age population between the age of 15 to 59 years, is actually the key to achieve the idea of Viksit Bharat or a developed nation by the year of 2047. And one of the most important factors to sustain this demographic dividend is the health and good health of the mother or janani. It is the mother who basically ensures the healthy start of the next generation's life. But what if the health of the mother itself is compromised? This is going to be the crux of our today's second topic discussion, where the editorial highlights the prevailing issues with the maternal healthcare in India, which forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of issues related to women development and the GS2 paper under the theme of government policies and interventions. So let's first try to understand the status of maternal healthcare in our country by referring to the data of Maternal Mortality Rate 2025, which was released very recently by the Office of Registrar General of India. According to which, India has actually improved its status in the maternal mortality rate, where our MMR used to stand at 97 per 1 lakh live birth between the years of 2018 to 20, but now it has actually fallen down to 93 deaths per 1 lakh live birth in between the year of 2019 to 21. The question arises that what is maternal mortality rate? It basically is a kind of an indicator of the reproductive health of the woman, where the maternal mortality basically stands for the death of a pregnant woman per 1 lakh live birth in a given region in a given time period. What is this maternal death? Remember that this maternal death includes the death of women while pregnant or giving birth, or within 42 days of the termination of pregnancy, but it does not include any accidental cases or causes. So as per the Office of Registrar General of India's report, currently the highest maternal mortality rate is actually observed between the age group of 20 to 29 years. And the state with the highest MMR is Madhya Pradesh, where 175 women are basically dying as per 1 lakh live birth. The state with the lowest MMR is Kerala. The states which basically follow the kind of the footsteps of Madhya Pradesh and they also have MMR or maternal mortality rate above 100 is Assam at second, UP at third, followed by Odisha, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal and Haryana. The idea is that all of these states have more maternal mortality rate than 100 per 1 lakh live birth, and thus they basically kind of contravenes the National Health Policy 2017 target which the government had set for our itself, that we are going to bring down the MMR below 100 in all states by the year of 2020 itself, and we are talking in the year of 2025. The idea is that yes, indeed there are certain states where they have kind of significantly improved the maternal health care. So for example, there are 8 states which have already achieved the SDG target or Sustainable Development Goal target of MMR below 70 lakh live birth by 2030. States, for example, Jharkhand, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Gujarat. However, if we refer to the findings by the World Health Organization, it states that every day 700 women dies from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. One maternal death occurred almost every 2 minutes in 2023. So just when you started reading this particular second topic, one maternal death has already been incurred. Over 90% of all maternal death actually occurred in low and lower middle income countries. So what are the causes behind such high maternal mortality rate in our country? The first is the prevailing barriers of patriarchy and social stigma. So for example, there is an article, the article titled Inequality in the Utilization of Health Services, written by Aruna Deka, where she basically writes that how the prevailing social stigma in the rural areas in Assam actually ensures at-home delivery of the child, thus kind of excluding a large section of women who are unable to kind of avail the institutional delivery. And thus in our country, you guys might have observed that in various parts there is huge reliance on this midwife system or dai system. These dais who basically lack any kind of medical expertise in the case of any kind of emergency or complications, such as for example prolonged labor. The second is that remember that all of this does not take place only because of the prevailing social stigma, but also because of the economic deprivation and socio-economic status. So for example, as per the UNDP's multi-dimensional poverty index of 2023, 18% of our country's population is multi-dimensionally poor. So these are basically the people who cannot afford high out-of-pocket expenditure on various kind of expensive medical treatments, medical bills, or kind of avail the various resources. So for example, just look at the out-of-the-pocket expenditure here. Just look at the India's out-of-pocket expenditure for any medical patient, that is 47%, and then compare it to China's 34% or Russia's 27% or as low as 10% for USA. The next is the medical illiteracy which prevails in rural areas. The medical illiteracy basically means that the person is not aware about the various medical implications which occur when the woman is pregnant or giving birth. So for example, a pregnant woman might go through something called as eclampsia or high blood pressure, or for example she might be suffering from gestational diabetes, or for example hemorrhage, which is nothing but the excessive bleeding which takes place while giving the birth or while the labor. So the idea is that if the person is not aware about such medical issues which might be suffering the woman, the idea is that many of the times in the larger circumstances people consider it to be some social stigma or some social taboo. So for example, some people say that this high blood pressure of a woman is actually being taken place because of buri najar or evil eye. So basically the kala tika can become solution to all of these problems. Then the today's article specifically kind of highlights one issue, and that is poor impetus on the nutrition of the mother. So it is very important that to sustain the fetus, the woman body has to kind of produce more blood. And thus the idea is that she can suffer from something called as anemia. What is anemia? Anemia is basically the lack of red blood cells in the blood, which is basically caused by the iron deficiency. And these red blood cells are nothing but the carrier of oxygen in the blood, and thus this anemia can actually significantly kind of impact the health of the woman. And to kind of just deal with all these issues, if the woman is thinking that okay, I will kind of avail the help of ASHA worker or the kind of primary and secondary infrastructure, just look at the poor state of that in our country. Just look at the doctor to patient ratio, the hospital to bed ratio, the public health expenditure, which is kind of much lower than all the other countries which are mentioned here. Over a period of time, this can also lead to the issue of sickle cell anemia altogether. Thus, the idea is that when it comes to the maternal mortality crisis, when World Health Organization ranks the countries with the highest number of maternal death, we are at the second place, just behind the countries of Nigeria. And we are basically falling in the categories of the countries like Democratic Republic of Congo and Pakistan. So that is obviously a kind of a shame for us. So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India? First of all, there are two feature schemes. First is the Janani Suraksha Yojana and the second is Matru Vandana Yojana. Both of them are centrally sponsored scheme. The Janani Suraksha Yojana, which was basically launched under the National Health Mission, it says that if there is any public healthcare facility and private healthcare facility registered with the government, accredited with the government, then it is going to provide the woman 1400 rupees in the urban areas and 1000 rupees in the rural areas. So if the woman is belonging to SC and ST category, then they can avail this in low and high performing states as well. Or if they do not fall to this category, then in high performing states, only those women who form in the below poverty line category, they can avail this benefit. The idea is that such woman who has given the birth shall be above the age of 19 years, and it can be availed only up to 2 live birth. The second is Matru Yojana, which is much more maternity benefit to pregnant and lactating women, where 5,000 rupees will be provided in 3 equal installments. The first one, when you will register under the scheme. The second one, when after 6 months you will come for kind of antenatal checkup. So you will be provided 2,000 rupees. The next, when after giving the birth, when you come for the immunization of child against polio and various other kind of viruses, then you will be provided the third installment. Then there is your Janani Shishu Suraksha Karyakram, where the idea is to eliminate the out-of-pocket expenditure for pregnant women by providing free delivery, including the expenses for surgery and medicines. The other steps taken by the government, such as for example Surakshit Matritva Ashvasan, where the government says that okay, if there is any pregnant woman who has come to primary health care and that woman is basically trying to avail any kind of healthcare benefit, it shall be provided. Otherwise, there is a strict penalty, stringent measures which will be taken against the doctors. The second is Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, where the government is saying that on the every 9th day of the month, there will be a kind of a large-scale antenatal care program which will be conducted by various primary healthcare centers across the country. Then the government has also tried to improve the conditions in the labor room, in the kind of surgery rooms for the women under the Lakshya program. Then there is a kind of an MDSR portal which basically kind of track the various kind of maternal deaths which are taking place across the country. And at the same time, we are also kind of tracking the reproductive and the childcare health of the women as well as the children which has just born. Also, the government has launched an Anemia Mukt Bharat Abhiyan under the larger Poshan Abhiyan, where various kind of food supplements are being provided to the women so that they do not occur the problem of iron deficiency. These are the larger steps which has been taken by the government. What are the suggestions which has been provided by the today's article? The today's article says that first of all, we need to replace this oral iron folic acid supplementation by a much more effective intravenous ferric carboxymaltose or IVFCM, which actually has the kind of capability to provide iron directly to the blood as well as increase the hemoglobin levels in the body significantly. Then the article suggests that we should also put impetus on curing the B12 deficiency as well, because just by curing the iron deficiency, it is because the supplementation which we are providing under the Poshan Abhiyan, that is not sufficient enough. So we need to focus upon this as well. Also, we need to encourage the preconception health checkups and provide preconception health education and training to various ASHA and Anganwadi workers as well. Thus, in the conclusion of the answer, you guys can write that how improving the maternal health is not merely a medical responsibility but also a larger social imperative, where the families, healthcare systems, policymakers and communities, they must work in cohesion to kind of and have a kind of a sustained commitment, leading to future generation whose potentials begin before the earth and ensuring the kind of demographic dividend for upcoming years. So just try to attempt this particular question and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about a very interesting concept, something called as heat action plans, which we shall be ready with, and at the same time something which also appeared in your prelims 2025 paper. So first of all, let's try to understand what does the article suggest today. The article talks about a national conference which took place titled India 2047 Building a Climate Resilient Future, where there was a kind of a industrialist who basically shared the lives of the reality of the garment workers, where they were kind of facing high wet bulb temperatures, which are kind of reflective of the science and the lived reality. The idea is that India is facing yet another season of intense heat and the toll on public health is impossible to ignore. So there are various kind of impact of this intensive heat waves which are taking place. The impacts on human health, such as for example dehydration, heat stroke, chronic illness. The extreme heat is pushing the health system to its limits. Yet our response remains siloed and heavily skewed towards crisis care instead of the prevention measures which we shall adopt to kind of safeguard ourselves from such heat waves taking place in the future. First of all, let's try to understand that what do we mean by the heat waves. So as per the classification given by the Indian Meteorological Department IMD, it suggests that, let's say for example, there is a plain area where the temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, or there is a hilly area where the temperature is 30 degrees Celsius, or if there exists a coastal area where the temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. This is basically the kind of a long period average of the temperature which we have taken for various years. The idea is that in this particular area, let's say for example in Delhi, the average prolonged temperature in the month of summers exists at around 40 degrees Celsius. But if the deviation from this normal existing temperature is more than 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, then as per the IMD, the region is suffering from heat wave. So when should a heat wave will be declared? Specifically if in any area the temperature is more than 45 degrees Celsius, or if in coastal areas it is more than 40 degrees Celsius, then the heat wave is incurring. The idea is that what causes a heat wave? So heat waves are generally the result of trapped air. They occur within a system of high atmospheric pressure which moves into the area and lasts for 2 or more days. So see what happens. Let's say for example there is a particular area. Heat waves form when the high pressure strengthens and remains over region for several days. So the idea is that over a course of this particular region, it is very obvious that when the region is facing intense heat, first of all the low pressure will be created here and a kind of a high pressure at a divergence built across the higher atmosphere. So this will be a kind of a normal flow of the air which will take place. Air from all around will kind of just come to fill this area and will keep on rising. The idea is that over a period of time, the pressure will also start flowing back from this high pressure to low pressure area. System forces air the downward, and this force prevents the air near the ground from rising, and thus this hot air will be kind of trapped in that region for a very long period of time. What is then the wet bulb temperature, which also appeared in your prelims 2025 paper, a very simple phenomena asked very beautifully by the UPSC. The idea is that wet bulb temperature basically kind of signifies a condition where there exists in a region a very high temperature, and that is also supplemented kind of a very high prevailing humidity in the region as well. So the basic idea is that, let's say for example, what happens that you are a human, I hope, and if you are facing intense heat, then obviously your body is getting warm. And to cool down your body, the body basically follows a simple mechanism through the process of perspiration, where it basically starts sweating and the heat is kind of released in the form of moisture, and that moisture is absorbed by the surrounding atmosphere. But what if there exists a high relative humidity in this atmosphere? So that basically means that the atmosphere is saying that no, I am already full, I cannot take any of your sweating anymore. So basically now you are not sweating as well, the perspiration is not taking place because of high humidity. At the same time the temperature is rising, and thus there is a lot of heat which is being stored in your body, which can lead to all of these health issues which we are discussing. And this sustainability limit is exactly at 35 degrees Celsius, which was exactly asked by UPSC. Just go and look at that particular question. So the article suggests that what we can do. Despite rising cases of heat-related illness, many healthcare providers still do not screen for heat exposures in the routine health checkups. So the article suggests that what is required is a standardized clinical protocol for diagnosing and managing heat illness. And for that purpose, there shall be a dedicated heat corners in every emergency departments. The article also suggests that we need to reduce the exposure from the heat at the first place. So for that we can take kind of coordinated action across different sectors. The urban planners must rethink about the housing design and public spaces. The water department shall ensure access to reliable supply of water during the peak summer month. That is another issue which India is facing. So for example, India is home to 18% of the global population, but always remember that we have only 4% of the global water resources. So India, as per capita water availability, exists at only 1100 meter cube per person, which is actually above the international threshold. And thus, as per the Niti Aayog itself, there are several states, for example Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, which will not be left with groundwater altogether. Also remember a very important fact that India is the world's largest consumer of groundwater as well. So thus there are kind of various steps which are required. The article suggests that Labor Department needs to enforce protection, such as for example regulated outdoor working hours. Further, climate scientists must also kind of collaborate for to guide timely data driven and targeted intervention. Thus, what we need to kind of implement on a very immediate basis in the first of all, we can start with the various large cities and then kind of just tone it down to the various metropolitan cities as well. The idea shall be to create a kind of a heat action plan altogether, where the short term strategies can basically include to kind of have a very sound forecast and early warning system in the form of inquiries supplemented by the Gagan. The second is to kind of do the social engineering. So let's say, for example, we can take various initiatives to kind of conserve the water for the future. The third is to create health and cooling centers at various places across the cities. Fourth is to boost the health infrastructure, obviously the primary healthcare infrastructure first of all. We have already seen the data. The second is the long-term kind of strategy which we need to adopt, where we kind of overhaul the complete urban planning altogether by integration of urban afforestation. So for example, you guys can recall the Miyawaki method, as well as integration of high performance buildings. So just for example, if you are not in the room, what if all the electric supplies just kind of switch it immediately, automatically itself? You don't need to switch it off. That will kind of conserve various amount of electricity consumption as well. Then for example, there are various buildings in the region of, let's say, Noida, Gurgaon, which are basically kind of planting various large trees so that to provide shade to the apartment buildings. For this purpose, these apartment buildings will remain cool and thus will lead to kind of less consumption of electricity in the form of AC. So all of these kind of high performance buildings can be implemented, and for that purpose we can also coordinate among various agencies as well. The idea is that we need to first of all create the heat profile of the region, then do the vulnerability assessment by kind of calculating the number of past heat wave events. We can also kind of calculate the yearly trend of this wet bulb temperature for specific areas, and then on the basis of that we can recommend for the mitigation and kind of decide the roles of various departments. So include these diagrams in your answers as well, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about a very interesting concept and kind of an ethical issue as well, and the issue is of autonomous satellite. So what is the context of the news? Let's first try to understand that. The article starts by telling us that when the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite in the year of 1957, it started the space age, where the use of satellite became very important. The satellite which basically kind of avail us various important features, such as for example capturing the images of Earth, kind of relaying the communications, beaming the GPS coordinates to the Earth, so the all mapping part, the kind of traveling which you are doing using the Google Maps, or for example the kind of defense which we were provided to the satellites, or the kind of wedding drones which were being launched by our dear neighbor. The idea is that the use of satellite is of paramount importance, but now with the integration of artificial intelligence, there are several autonomous satellites in the function. The satellites which are self-guided by the use of technology in and kind of orbiting the Earth altogether. The article suggests that what if there takes place a malfunctioning of such autonomous satellite in the Earth orbit, where it kind of interprets a routine atmospheric anomaly as some kind of collision threat with other satellite, and thus it kind of completely deviates from its path altogether. And thus it kind of either get into very close vicinity of a military satellite or directly impacts the military satellite of a rival nation altogether. What will happen then? So obviously that can have to lead to a various kind of diplomatic protest and space war altogether, but the more important stage, it can lead to something called as Kessler's syndrome. What is Kessler's syndrome? Kessler's syndrome basically suggests that there are too many objects in the lower Earth orbit. A single collision of any of these objects can kind of ensue a chain reaction, a domino impact altogether. This explosion would create even more debris that could lead to all satellites, right? Just like a kind of a domino falling altogether. So this is a very major issue and being driven by which particular thing, that is autonomous satellite. Why this issue has become much more prominent? Because of the cluttering of space which is taking place. So as per the NASA's report in the year of 2023, it suggested that in the space there are various space missions which are launched, for example our Gaganyaan. There are various satellites which we have in the space. The autonomous satellites are also being launched by various private companies now with just use of artificial intelligence. So NASA predicts that there exist more than 1 million small, micro and large satellites which revolves around the Earth in the orbit. And the exact same thing which we are discussing, that these satellites are traveling at the speed of 28,000 km per hour. So just imagine that even if the satellite is as small as 1 meter, any such collision can lead to a large scale destruction altogether, thus hampering various kind of critical functions, for example communication, transport, weather, climate monitoring altogether. And also if they enter back into the Earth's atmosphere, their falling on the surface can also damage to property and life on Earth as well. In the very same time, you guys can actually see through various headlines in the newspaper that how various private entities, such as for example SpaceX of Elon Musk, is trying to push more and more satellites into the atmosphere, thus kind of risking this particular Kessler's syndrome. Let's first try to understand that what is this autonomous satellite which we are discussing, which are kind of driven by the artificial intelligence, which can also come as a kind of a statement in a prelims examination. The article suggests that these are the satellites which have automated space operation. So for example, they can kind of do independent maneuvering in the space altogether, docking, inspection, in-orbit refueling. Then these satellites have the power of self-diagnosis and repair. They monitor their own health, identify the faults, repair them. They can do the route planning as well by optimizing orbital trajectories to avoid any kind of hazards and also save fuels. So for example, keeping themselves in the Lagrangian points. Then they can also go for targeted geospatial intelligence, as well as combat support can also be provided. However, does this autonomous satellites driven by artificial intelligence being launched by private corporations, does it fall under the regulations and the ambit of the Outer Space Treaty 1967? The answer is no. This Outer Space Treaty 1967, remember, it prohibits the weapon of mass destruction, that they cannot be deployed in the space, but at the same time it does not prevent the placement of ordinary weapons. That's why you guys can recall that how recently the Golden Dome has been launched by USA, which was covered by the Analyst. Then there exists a convention for international liability for damage caused by the space object 1972, but at the same time even that does not cover these autonomous satellites at all. Also recently we have seen that how there is a growing militarization of space, for example the launch of Space Force by USA and now Golden Dome by USA. At the same time the installation of various cruise and ballistic missiles, where many of the time just traverses through the space, such as for example Agni 5 and BrahMos by our country itself. So the article suggests that there are certain ethical issues. So for example, if such Kessler syndrome occurs because of the mistake which is committed by the artificial intelligence or this autonomous satellite, who will be held responsible? The maker of that satellite, or the nation to which that satellite belongs to, or the nation which was being benefited by the service of this satellite? How you will decide that, because none of that is covered under the Outer Space Treaty 1967. So the article suggests that what we need to do, we need to enshrine meaningful human control in space law, such as for example, which was suggested by 2024 ISL Working Group's final report on legal aspect of AI in space as well. So for that what we can do, we can bring global certification framework, such as those under the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space and the International Standard Organization, which can test that how these AI powered satellite handles collisions or subject to various kind of tests with various kind of data. And we can also kind of borrow the various provisions from the International Convention on Liability and Compensation for Damage in connection with the carriage of hazardous substances 1996, as well as Convention for Unification of Certain Rules for International Carriage by the Air Use Strict Liability Act of 1999. So remember these two conventions, remember this debate related to autonomous satellites, and move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand a very important concept of Madden-Julian oscillation. What is it? Why it is in the news? Let's try to understand that. The article today suggested that the IMD has predicted that the monsoon will make its onset on the 1st of June. However, the monsoon kind of arrived on the coast of Kerala 8 days prior to that itself. Why? Because of the favorable conditions to the monsoon. So what is monsoon? You guys know that it is kind of a seasonal reversal of the winds which take place. The winds are basically the easterlies which blow, the trade winds. So these trade winds are blowing from the direction of east to west. They come at the coast of Somalia, and then they kind of reverses towards our country, entering from the coast of Kerala. Why they reverses? Because of the kind of the intertropical convergence zone, or kind of a monsoon trough of low pressure which is created over the Gangetic belt of our country, as the sun has reached to the Tropic of Cancer and is warming that region. So the wind is blowing, reaches to the region of Somalia. Here it is high pressure in comparison to the low pressure which is created on the Gangetic belt of our country. The monsoon takes reversal, but now when it takes reversal, these easterlies which were blowing from east to west, they enter into our country from west and south, thus called as southwest monsoon. Why these favorable conditions were created? The article suggests that it was created because of the Madden Julian oscillation. What it is a complex moving system of winds, clouds and pressure which originates in the Indian Ocean and is one of the most important influencing Indian monsoon. This MGO travels eastward at the speed of 4 to 8 meter per second. Remember, it moves eastward, right? And the easterlies are coming from this direction. Okay? This is clear. So what is MGO? MGO is basically the eastward moving disturbances of winds, clouds and pressure which traverses through this tropical Indian Ocean region. Remember that as we talk about the kind of El Nino, seasonal oscillation, it is seasonal. So it prevails for several seasons. But MGO is intra-seasonal. So it has only a kind of a span of 30 to 60 days. It will move eastward. It will bring these kind of rain bearing clouds, and then it will return back to its initial position within the 30 to 60 days. That's why MGO is defined as intra-seasonal tropical climate variability. So the low pressure was created here because of intense heating. Now it will start blowing in the eastward direction from west to east. This is your MGO. Because of this, there will be kind of rain bearing clouds, heavy rain will take place. In comparison to that, now here will be created what? A kind of a high pressure. So now there will be kind of a subjection of wind that will take place. This will fill the air here. So it's kind of moving. Here over a period of time, again low pressure will be created. So the cloud will come from that direction. 30 to 60 days and again returning back to its initial position. What is El Nino then? So in normal circumstances, what happens? That this is the Pacific Ocean, Central Pacific Ocean, where there is cold water. Cold water, high pressure. So the trade winds blows in east direction, easterlies, reaches to Somalia, reverses back, reaches to India. Normal condition. But what if in this central equatorial Pacific, there takes place warming of the water and thus low pressure is formed here itself? Don't you think that the trade winds or the easterlies which were blowing, now the low pressure is here, they will not blow from high pressure to low pressure. So they will kind of get weakened. And if they are weakened, there will be less seasonal reversal of wind from the Somalia's coast to our country. So that basically means that when El Nino takes place, there will be basically what? A kind of a weakened monsoon. So MJO, it kind of supplements the monsoon. ENSO, it kind of weakened down the monsoon, remember it. How we decide the declaration of the arrival of the monsoon? So basically, the IMD has decided on 3 criteria. First is, if 60% of 14 meteorological stations in Kerala, Lakshadweep and Karnataka, if they are facing rainfall of 2.5 mm for more than 2 days. Second, if the westerlies are blowing at the speed of 27 to 37 km per hour with a specific depth. And third, if the insect derived outgoing long wave radiation, that is basically the kind of the heat which is emitted by the earth surface, ocean, glaciers, all of them. The heat which is being emitted from that is below 200 watts per meter square between the 5 to 10 degree northern latitude. If these 3 conditions are met, then IMD says that yes, the monsoon has arrived. Does an early onset foretell a good monsoon? Nahi. It does not. Just as delay does not foretell a poor monsoon as well. A delay of few days or perhaps the monsoon arriving a few days early has no bearing on the quality or amount of the rainfall. The southwest monsoon has currently covered the entire Tamil Nadu, Tripura, Manipur, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. So keep these facts in your mind and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to learn about a very interesting concept of gene editing technology, something which we called as CRISPR-Cas9. So let's first try to understand what is the context. The context is that there was a 9-month-old boy who was born with a genetic disorder. Poor boy. He became the first person to successfully receive a custom gene editing treatment, which was basically devised by this hospital of Philadelphia, where they developed a more personalized treatment, something called as base editing. So what is base editing? Base editing is now an updated iOS version of old CRISPR-Cas9 technology. So before to understand these much more technical terms, let's understand some basics which has been given in the explained article today itself. First, let's try to understand what is base. A base is nothing but a biological compound which bonds with another base to help form DNA or RNA. Okay? This base basically concept of these kind of acid: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. DNA is a molecule which basically carries the genetic instruction used in the development and the function of the living organism. So for example, if my eyes have a certain color, this is a kind of a genetic information which has been passed from one generation to another. Even though in my family there has no person with such eyes, such good looking eyes. Then there is DNA sequence, the specific order of the 4 bases which is in a DNA molecule. Genome is an organism which complete the set of genetic instructions, and RNA is nothing but the DNA cousins which makes crucial products such as protein. We have understood the basic. Now let's try to understand what is CRISPR-Cas9. So when a gene, a particular gene is attacked by virus in our body, in human body, our body develop a immune memory which is called as antibodies. So our immune memory or antibodies say that don't worry virus, I will remember you, come next time, right? The idea is that the next time when the same virus attacks, we will identify and neutralize this pathogen. So remember the vaccines which were being given to you for the COVID, that was basically nothing to develop antibodies or immune memory, correct? Now what is clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats or CRISPR? So it is basically the immune system which is found in microbes like bacteria. So when a virus attacks bacteria, the bacteria does not produce antibodies like us, rather it produces a genetic memory. So the idea is that when the virus is attacking bacteria, what bacteria does that it basically takes the DNA from the virus and insert it in its own genome. And then this CRISPR basically produces RNA by using the DNA of the virus itself. So when the second attack takes place of the same virus, the RNA which was produced by the microbes or bacteria, it recognizes the virus DNA and then it guides a particular kind of protein or enzyme called as Cas9 to eliminate this DNA altogether. So this is a kind of a immune system which is deployed by the microbes or bacteria. The same thing was copy and pasted by 2 scientists named as Jennifer Doudna and E. Carpentier in the year of 2011, for which they basically received the Nobel Prize for Chemistry as well, where they developed this gene editing tool of CRISPR-Cas9. How does it function? So remember that the genetic information of DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 chemical bases, that is adenine, guanine, cytosine and thymine. A always pairs with T, that is AT, and C always pairs with G, that is CG. So the idea is that, let's say for example, genetic disorder, it can suffer how? That let's say there is a presence of an abnormal DNA sequence that is either AG or for example GT. Okay? The first task for the genetic editing tool is to identify the abnormal DNA sequence behind a patient's ailment. Once the bad DNA is located, the scientists create a guide RNA which is attached to the Cas9 enzyme, which is then introduced to the target cells of the patient. Okay? The idea is that the guide RNA will recognize the bad DNA sequence and then the Cas9 enzyme will cut the DNA altogether. So what is this base editing now? The base editing does not make a double strand break like for example CRISPR-Cas9. Rather, it just targets the single base editing with the help of Cas9 enzyme altogether. So basically the kind of the editing tool remains the same. The idea is that earlier what was happening, let's say for example there was a AT which is a kind of a normal one, and that has been removed to AG. So this whole AG was being cut by CRISPR-Cas9 and this kind of AT was being installed. Okay? Now the idea is that no, if there is a AC and AT, only this C and T will be cut, right? So C will be cut because it is kind of abnormal and T will be installed there, AT will be created, that's all, right? That is basically the base editing, so that it is much more precise. However, obviously, if it is so precise, you guys can guess that the cost of it will be on the higher side as well. Thus, the scaling of technology for mass consumption, the article suggests that it will going to remain a major issue because it is going to be a very costly treatment if it is ever possible. So remember this whole CRISPR-Cas9 and base editing technology as well, and we move forward to the last news of the day, where we are going to understand about the Collegium System. Why? So if you guys remember that the current strength of Supreme Court is 34. The Supreme Court Collegium on Monday basically recommended the names of the Chief Justice of 2 high courts to elevate them to become now the judge of Supreme Court. The working strength of Supreme Court has now been reduced to 31 with the retirement of several judges, and it is further going to reduce to 30. So the idea is that what is this technical term of Collegium System which is in the news? As we have kind of learned repeatedly that the judges of the Supreme Court are appointed by the President. So there are 3 important judges case which you guys need to remember. The first judge case basically laid down that it has been written that whenever the President is appointing the judges of the Supreme Court, the President is required to consult with the CJI, the Chief Justice of India. The first judge case said that this consultation with CJI by the President does not mean concurrence and only the exchange of views. So CJI says that, okay, please appoint this person as the judge. President says that, no, I'm not interested. The conversation is over. Whoever the President will appoint will become the judge. That's what used to happen. Then in the second judge case, the Supreme Court kind of tried to ensure the independence of judiciary, where it said that any advice such tendered by the CJI is now going to be binding on the President in matter of the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court. And for this purpose, CJI shall also consult at least 2 senior most judges. Then came the third judge's case of 1998. Here Supreme Court said that such consultation basically means consultation of plurality of judges. So there will be CJI and 4 other senior most judges, and they will basically kind of recommend that who is going to be the next judge of Supreme Court to the President, and obviously such recommendation is going to be binding on the President. But even if 2 such judge give adverse opinion about the judge of, let's say for example, High Court who is being elevated to the Supreme Court, then the CJI shall not send the recommendation to the President. The government or the executive basically said that, okay, we are going to kind of intervene and we are going to create a National Judicial Appointment Commission to replace the Collegium System, where now the judges will be appointed by the executive through this 99th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2040. But Supreme Court kind of held it as unconstitutional and void, and thus abolished the National Judicial Appointment Commission altogether by citing the Article 50 of the Constitution, which is a directive principle of state policy which ensures the separation of judiciary and executive, another statement which appeared in your prelims 2025. So keep all of these important discussions in your mind. Just try to attempt the questions at the end of the video to test your knowledge, and we will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.